Hello, and welcome to Battery Dance TV. My name is Jonathan Hollander, and I'm the Artistic Director and founder of Battery Dance here in New York City. And I'm delighted to have two wonderful guests today. I have Thang Dao, and I have Vive Khamsingsavath. And the two of you are inspiring dance makers, dancers, people who are really making an impact in the dance field in New York and around the world, actually. So I'm going to start with you, Thang. If you would introduce yourself to our audience and just give a little thumbnail about your background.
Hi, my name is Thang Dao. I'm a choreographer. I worked in New York City. I used to dance for the Student Petroleum Dance Company, the Met, and then I transitioned over to choreography with my first commission with Ballet Austin. And ever since, I've been creating works for universities and dance companies such as Philadelphia, ALE2, Ballet X, and yeah.
That's wonderful. What a wonderful, very fast and broad stroke trajectory you've had. And Vive, would you introduce yourself? I think some of the Battery Dance audience is certainly already familiar with you, but let's assume that since Battery Dance TV has an audience in 200 countries, there may be people who haven't yet met you.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Vivake. I go by Vive. I grew up in Binghamton, New York, and I went to college at Binghamton University, where I graduated with a degree in English. It was at Binghamton, my senior year, that I started dance. I trained really quickly. I joined a company. We traveled the world. I was getting a lot of work quickly via social media. And then I moved to New York City, where I transitioned more into contemporary dance. I worked with various companies, and currently I'm with Battery Dance Company, where I
luckily for us.
I'm honored to be a part of the company. I teach, choreograph, and dance in New York City, and I work in and out of the commercial world and concert world.
So I brought the two of you together for perhaps obvious reasons, that you both have families that came from Southeast Asia. And I was curious to discuss with you whether or not the roots and the traditions and legacy that you bring with you, consciously or unconsciously, has affected your choice of dance, the work you do, the aesthetic you bring. Thang, can you comment on that?
Yes, I think for me, my route into dance, particularly ballet and modern, has really shaped who I am today in terms of how I engage in the world. And part of my experience as a dancer, as an artist, is to learn about myself and my own roots, because I was displaced when I was younger from Vietnam to the US. And so in my 20s, I felt really disconnected from my own community. And, I wanted to figure out a way to connect back with my community. And dancing was the way that I chose to build, this bridge back to something that, was very foreign to me. And with the help of Ballet Austin, Michelle Martin particularly, we wrote a grant to the Princess Grace Foundation to see if I can get support to create a ballet for my community using, movements that I felt were particular to the community through songs, images, and pictures and stories from people in the Vietnamese community.
When you say your community, are you talking about the displaced Vietnamese community in the United States?
Yes, the Vietnamese diaspora.
Mm-hmm.
And so we wrote this grant together and proposed it to the Princess Grace Foundation, and they supported the project. And so I was able to invite, one of the most famous Vietnamese singer. She was the voice of the Vietnam War. Her name is Con Lee, to join in the project. And I went around the community with the help of this organization of young ladies in Austin. Sorry. They helped me, extract interviews from from the elders in the community about their experience in the Vietnam War and also their experience in America. And so from that and from this collection of songs by Trinh Kong Sơn, and I was able to create a narrative that was identifiable and accessible to my community. And so we took the ballet from Austin to Houston and then to Orange County years later.
In California.
Yeah, and so, you know, dance has really helped me bridge that gap and gave me the opportunity to learn and investigate my own history.
That's fantastic. You didn't mention the fact that you were a Princess Grace Fellow. So that's why you were able to go back and apply for this project support. So congratulations. You know, I know that that's a very competitive grant, and obviously your talent was visible to the panel there, and it's absolutely wonderful. Vive, what about you? To what extent has your family's background in Laos played a role in your exploration and your choices that you've made as an artist?
Sure. You know, since I am first generation Laotian American, I don't really know much about the culture in Laos, but what I do know that what my parents instilled within me is the idea of work ethic. And you know, coming to a new country and having to start over and survive, I feel like I carry that embodiment of working hard and proving yourself. So for me, you know, I may not bring like the cultural traditions, but the underlying personality of the Laotian people, I feel like I carry with me. As I continue to explore my arts, it's really an investigation of my identity. So I have been recently, in the past few years, been interviewing my family just to understand how and why they came here. And I have been exploring their stories within my works. So I have been using the stage as a canvas to kind of paint the story of why I'm here today.
Wow, that's very profound. I look into myself, and I think as a choreographer, you know, in the various works that I've done, connections with my mother, connections with my father, connections with the family values that I grew up with. I think that that's instilled in me and has propelled me in many ways. So it's interesting to hear you say that. You know, I suppose that members of our audience might be thinking, and I certainly was thinking, that as first generation Americans coming from backgrounds of families that perhaps fled under very difficult situations to get here, that parents would ordinarily, I mean, a lot of the motivation for them to come here was for their children and to give their children a better life and a safer harbor for themselves here. And then I would think that parents would be very concerned, as my parents were when I dropped out of college because I came to New York to become a dancer, that families that had just arrived here and felt very unstable on a financial and social level, that they would have wanted for their children to be bankers, lawyers, doctors, dentists, whatever, you know, something very steady and definitely financially secure. And the two of you, men, chose dance, which even, you know, a boy choosing dance who's born here from many generations back still would be fighting a lot of stigma and a lot of ideas, you know, on well-meaning parents to say, hey, how are you going to make it in the world? So Tan, Was that a factor? I mean, did you get feedback from your parents? Were they worried about you? Did they try to dissuade you when you decided to become a dancer?
I fortunately did not encounter that. My parents were very supportive of whatever I was doing, as long as I was doing well in school, as long as my grades were up,
Mhm.
and I was not causing any trouble to them or to their own lives. They were very supportive. They came to all my shows when I was in school productions, and that's something that's very foreign to them. To go to the theater and watch your children perform on stage, and I think what uh, what made them comfortable with me, going down this trajectory of being a dancer was in California, Southern California, there's this competition for high school kids
Mm.
to compete in the performing arts, voice, music, instrumental, dance, modern ballet. And I participated in that competition. And at the end of the competition, they select 2 finalists to perform on the stage of the Dorothy Chandler. It's called the
Wow.
Spotlight Award.
That's like the music center in
Yeah,
LA.
that's the Music Center in LA. And in 1997, I'm giving my age away. I was one of the finalists competing on the stage for the modern category. And my parents came to see, their son perform in this huge theater. And at the end of the night, I was awarded the, Spotlight Award for my
Oh
category.
my gosh, it's
And so,
incredible.
and so that made them really proud. And, to witness, this huge audience in this huge theater, I think for them
I
was,
can hardly imagine. I mean, I just can't imagine how they felt. I
yeah,
know that you must have been exhilarated with the passion and excitement of the whole thing, but your parents
yeah.
sitting there and watching their son uh, win, incredible. I mean,
Yeah.
they must be, yeah.
And so that made it easier for them to, to trust me to go
They
down
weren't going to say no at that
No,
point.
they were gonna say.
It's like start medical school.
Tom, how
Uh,
old were you when you began dance?
um, it was let me see, my sophomore year of high school, but I had taken, some dance classes at this conservatory on weekends before
Mm.
that, but seriously training every day was in my sophomore year of high school.
But when you went to that, when you said you were dancing before that and you went to dance classes, can you think back to the very first time you walked into a dance studio? And
Yes,
what was that like?
it was an experience. I think for me, I was always curious, and at the time, I was very much into Janet Jackson's music videos,
Mm.
and I would watch, her videos and learn the steps, through the TV screen. And my friend had told me about this conservatory at Cal State LA, on the campus of Cal State LA for high school kids, for high school kids. Also, my English teacher from my junior high school had also mentioned it. So I had these, recommendations. And so me and my friend decided one weekend to go and, audition or, ask them if we can participate in this Saturday class, that happened every week, thinking that modern dance was modern dance of the time, Janet
Right,
Jackson.
Janet.
And so we went in, and the teacher, Miss Carrie McDonald, I still talk to her. So she has been a force in my dance career. She was the one that taught me discipline, and also kept me inspired to come back each week. You know, the first few classes, you know, I came in and I said, well, this does not look like Janet Jackson. And she's like, well, it's not Janet. It's not like that. You know, the exercises and all of that, you know, and she saw I was out of place and a little confused, but she said, you know, just come back, give it a try for a couple of weeks and see, you know, if you like it. And that was it.
Were there other boys in the class?
My friend.
Okay.
Yeah, that was,
But
yeah,
the two of you were and then the rest were
yeah.
girls?
Yes.
So that in itself is a barrier that some boys face. They, you know, either they or their fathers say, do you really want to be in a class that's all girls? You know, there's these preconceived notions.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you had an incredibly supportive family.
Yes.
They didn't stop you. They didn't ridicule you. They just saw what made you happy.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Vive, you started so much later. And as a late starter myself, I started in my first year of college, which it was kind of too late by that point for me. It depends on the body. Had you done any kind of sports or swimming, gymnastics, anything like that before you started dancing?
Yeah, so I'll tell a little bit about my background with dance and growing up. But my parents, you know, they tried really hard for us to acculturate into America. So dance was never on the radar. So it wasn't something that I even knew could be a career path or even a hobby. So for me growing up, my parents really directed me towards like becoming a teacher, becoming a lawyer, becoming a doctor. So my entire formal training going to high school, I was always an overachiever. I was on student government. I was in sports. I was on varsity teams. I was in National Honor Society. I was the president of like the International Students Committee. So for me, I was always on this path to becoming some sort of leader. So when I went to college, I was doing a lot there too. And I found dance. My parents never really thought about it as me pursuing it. They thought it was like, oh, he just found something he likes, so it might be a hobby. But I actually started teaching my first year dancing just because it came so natural to me, and I had a lot of studios ask me to teach for them.
It's called Born to Dance. You're a born dancer, even though you didn't know that, and your parents had no concept of it.
I think that's so true. You know, to this day, it's like dance comes to me so naturally. And I feel like it's normal. Like, I feel like everybody can just do it, but I think it was something that I was meant to do. So that's why it does come so naturally.
So what about you, that first walk into the dance studio and, you know, either putting on ballet slippers or whatever the kind of dance was?
Right. I will say this. I started dancing during a time of like the social media explosion. So I didn't really have to go train yet. I did a freestyle on YouTube. It got 10,000 views within a couple of weeks. And that's when I started gaining a following. And that's when people started asking me to teach. So for me, I was just naturally a good dancer and I was getting hired for work already. But because I am, you know, was instilled with a hard work ethic, I did want to train. I did want to become knowledgeable in ballet, in modern, in jazz. So stepping into the studio for the first time, very awkward because everything has, you know, a certain sculpture, a technique and foundation, but it didn't take me very long. I think within my first year, I started to understand form. And I think because I started older, I came into the studio with a little bit more awareness and kind of clarity about what I wanted to do with dance. So
I mean, I can relate to that. I remember the first ballet class I took. I just felt like I had to learn to walk again. I mean, it's like, you know, you feel like everything you're doing is wrong. Wrong in terms of matching up with the vocabulary and the regime and the technique that you're required to do, turning out, for example. So
I will say this, Jonathan, because I started so late, all of my teachers at the university knew like my potential. each teacher that I had, my modern ballet jazz teacher, they gave me special attention. So
Mm.
they did pay more attention to me in class to really help me get to where they knew I could go.
Well, not only that, if I'm assuming, like the experience that I had, that having a boy who's not, who's of a certain height, who looks handsome and, has a good formed body, it's like, okay, get him. We need him. Get him in the productions quick, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, I often think it's lucky to be a boy in dance in that sense, that you're in demand in a way that, when we have an audition, we'll have 100 women and we'll have 5 men. So we do benefit from that. No question about it. And I didn't mean to take away from the natural talent and the, what those teachers saw in you, clearly in both cases, that, you were fostered by certain people. And let's talk a little bit about that. You mentioned one teacher, Tan, earlier, but who were some of the mentors and choreographers and people in the profession once you knew that that was your path? Who did you look to for inspiration?
For my teachers, I think all of my teachers were impactful in my development. I mean, they all taught me something, from Andra Corvino, Jane Kosminski, Yasuko Tokunaga, Jennifer Scanlon, all Laura Glenn. They were all very concerned about my development in terms of being an artist, being a dancer. And so they took me under their wings and, really supported, gave me a supportive foundation so that I can run to them if I had any, questions or any reservations or any, anytime I felt any conflict or intimidation, as part of the journey. In terms of choreography, I think just being exposed to different types of movement aesthetics, trying different movement styles on your body, and just being open to choreographic ideas and dance that inspire me. I think for me, a lot of it was Ulysses Dove. I really love his work. My experience with Stephen, I thought that working with Stephen in terms of being in that place, in his creative space, was so enlightening for me as a choreographer. I never worked in that way. And being in his creative process really showed me a different way of looking at choreography. And
how long were you with Stephen Petronio Company?
I was with the company for 5 years.
Okay.
Yeah, 5 years, yeah. And so I think, just being exposed and just going out and trying different movement styles and aesthetics and watching, the latest. I love Crystal Pite. I love her work. I think she's amazing. I love Killian's work. All of the European developments over there. William Forsythe. So watching all of those were informative to how I saw dance and how I saw what are the possibilities of the bodies moving in space.
You mentioned Ulysses, who was a very, very dear friend of mine at the Cunningham studio when I first arrived there in 1971.
Oh my God.
Did you have the opportunity to work? Was he alive when did you work with him, or were you referring to the works that he did for the Ailey Company?
Yes, I was referring to the pieces that I've seen on Ailey, seen on videos, and just the first encounter of his work for me. Not knowing, who he was, because, I came from California. I didn't have that kind of exposure. And so my first encounter was a video of his work that Yasuko Tokunaga had lent me to say, hey, you should watch these things and be informed. And, I watch all these videotapes of classic works, and, I learned about them. But my first encounter with Dove's work really, really shifted, how, how I saw dance as a choreographic practice, instead
Wow.
of performance.
I'm very touched. I'm very touched by that because of my relationship with him, but also because, of course, he died way too young.
Yeah.
And another friend of mine just recently died in Paris, Patrick Dupont, the ballet
Oh, yes.
dancer. And when Patrick was head of the opera ballet in Paris, he commissioned Ulysses. He brought Ulysses to Paris to choreograph there.
Yes.
And so there, in these interviews and in my life and in dance, these interlocking circles that you don't necessarily predict, but we share. And there's, dance is a very, very competitive field, and it's probably the most under-resourced of the art forms in terms of funding. And yet
Yes.
the people who choose to put their lives into the dance field, there are these rewards and these connections. Vive, tell us about what dance you saw that inspired you in terms of the concert dance.
Actually, I want to give you a different perspective because, you know, after graduating college, you clearly you need to find a job to make money. So for me, during that time, I was a commercial dancer, which means that I was getting dance work that was related to the industry on television or going on tour or doing things for brands. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a different perspective. During that time, 2007, America's Best Dance Crew was on television, and that was the first time that this kind of dance, like hip hop dance and like social dance, was popular. Like So You Thinking Dance was also out. So I studied from Brian Puspos, Travis Wall, all these commercial dancers because they were doing the kind of work that I was interested in doing and that I knew I could make money doing. So those were my influences at the time. So it wasn't necessarily concert work. Concert work came to me later. But in training with these convention kind of choreographers or competition kind of choreographers, I was able to book jobs going on tour, traveling the world, being on television. And I think that for me uh, made my parents proud to get work, to make money. So
I'm sure that it gave them comfort to see that you could actually earn through dance, which was probably something they couldn't really conceive of until you showed them.
Exactly.
And so what about the transition? Like, I mean, you're making money, you're doing commercial work, you're feeling very full in terms of, your opportunities, but then you made a switch to this much less lucrative, much less stable kind of career of the modern dance world, the contemporary dance world in New York. I mean, that must have been, was that a sudden thing or was it just gradual?
I think throughout my entire training, I was always cross training. So as much as I was doing hip hop and commercial work, I was also training modern ballet, jazz. Again, I do have to say that social media played a huge role in where I am today. I always had a following. So for me, I've always been able to work because I have, followers that want my work, either my classes or my choreography. But I think I had all this training from all these different styles that I finally was like, let me become the artist and take away all this knowledge and create what I want to create now as an artist. So I think for the past few years, it's been really trying to develop my not just own style, but kind of going away from everything that I've learned to create movement that is relatable, that is accessible to people. I think as an artist, I want to create the change that I want to see. So I don't necessarily look like another choreographer, or I'm not trying to pay homage to any other style. I'm trying to create movements that tells my story, that the audience can also find a way to relate to. So for me, that transition happens through all the work and the training that I had, and finally allowing myself to become my own artist.
That's the struggle, I think. Tan, you know, you've been commissioned by different companies. To what extent have you absorbed and reflected on who that company is and what you feel they need? Or is it, I mean, where is that push and pull between the company that commissioned you and what you want to say as an artist?
I think generally, each time I've come into a commission, it's been a blank slate for me. I haven't been told to choreograph in any way, or at the end of the day, what I want to do is, show my I said language, but also make the dancers look great. That's my job, to see what I can do so that the dancers look great in my vocabulary. And that is that is the foundation of my process. When I go in, I look at each dancer individually and see how I can extract movements from them that showcase their ability while also telling my narrative or my story. And so I think the companies that I've worked with have been really supportive in terms of saying, do whatever you want, make them look good, make the piece look good, and they trust me, and so they trust that I would give the company something that they can tour with, that is accessible to the audience and also showcases their dancer.
I think that's what a young choreographer learns, that you can have a prefabricated idea of what you want to do with your choreography. You get into the studio and somehow the mesh between your idea and the dancers isn't quite gelling, and you have to be able to adapt.
Yeah.
Vive, do you want to comment on that? I mean, does that resonate with you?
Sure. I want to give a different perspective again, just with concert versus commercial. So for example, I work with a lot of brands. So I worked with like the W Hotels, I worked with Lululemon, but I did a project with NARS Cosmetics. And what they wanted to do was they were just going to launch a mascara, but they wanted performers. So they rented a big warehouse and they said, we just want people to dance. So for me, they hired me as a choreographer, and I was able to take just that one idea of like, we want dance, and I was able to create an immersive experience. So for me, working in the commercial industry, they do give you a lot of freedom to take that canvas and create what you want for it. So for me, I was able to create an experience where there was multiple layers of performance happening in different spaces. So there's a lot of freedom where you get to experiment with what you want to say, but also what the audience what you want the audience to feel.
Or the client, I mean, the client has put you in this warehouse and they've said, this is our product, and then go for it. But you still have some kind of limitations that are put on you. And I think oftentimes limitations can be very helpful, because otherwise you have absolutely too many options in front of you. But so show us the difference between that situation and a concert dance opportunity that you may have had.
Yeah, I think for me as a concert dancer, I'm not necessarily the choreographer, which I like.
You like being a dancer and having somebody else direct you? Is that what you mean?
Well,
at this stage,
both, and I'm thankful to be able to do both. So when I work in the commercial world, I'm both the choreographer and the dancer. In the concert world, I haven't really choreographed too much for theaters in that sense. I'm more, but I guess I would say the difference is the audience. So I think for concert dance, it's really about the movements, the engagements of what you want to say as an artist. I think in the commercial world, you're trying to sell something, so you're trying to pump up this energy. So it's a bit more superficial in a way.
Somehow, what I'm getting from this interview, and I'm sure the audience is with me on this, is that both of you are leaders. Both of you have had a very strong sense of purpose and direction, which wasn't what I necessarily thought about in the generic way of I have two first-generation Americans. They're from Southeast Asia. They took up the odd field of dance. But in a way, both of you have embodied this form and have brought your experience to it and made it work for you, which obviously showed leadership, the hard work that you both mentioned, the high aspirations of your parents for you and of you yourself. And I think the world is a better place because of both of you. So thank you for joining me in this interview. I'm really inspired. I have a little bit of tingle going on here because you are good people and you're doing great work. And I'm so proud to know you both. Thank you so much for joining us here on Battery Dance TV.
Thank you so much, Jonathan.
I do want to say something.
Okay. This isn't the end, in other words. Yeah. This is the coda.
We always need one. We always need a coda.
Go for it, Vive.
Yeah, what's happening in the world today with violence against Asian people and the idea of like stop Asian hate. For me, what I think the solution is to make or to allow Asians to be more visible. So for me as an Asian American artist, it's important that people see me choreographing or teaching or dancing, because once you see, it as a norm, we become part of the society. We become part of like what's normal, and we're not separated as different. I think what the world needs is to see more Asian people on television and film and in leadership roles. And so for me, that's what I want to be a part of. And that's why I do what I do, because I do want to be the change that I need to see. Like I went to see a movie in the theater the other day. There was no Asian person in the film whatsoever until the very end. And I was like, oh, okay, they cast that one Asian person. But I think it's our responsibility, to put more Asian people in the mainstream. So we become more, not acceptable, but part of what's happening. I think for a long time, Asians have just been pushed to the background, especially Southeast Asians. You don't hear about Vietnamese or Laotian people. So we become this invisible or not talked about. So to have an interview like this, where you are highlighting our stories, is very important. So I thank you for that.
Thank you for that. I wasn't going to bring that up, but coming from you, I think it's very important for our audience and to understand the intersection between the arts and what's going on in the world, in our city, in our country. And I think we all need to embrace change for the better, and acceptance, more than acceptance, understanding and integration and support, mutual support, not just mutual understanding, but mutual support. So thank you for that, Vive, and thank you, Tan, for joining us today.
Thank you, Vive.
Thank you both.